In this video, we will be discussing the unsolved mystery of the Isdal Woman. On June 29, 1970, residents of a small Norwegian town were horrified to discover the charred remains of an unidentified woman who had been burned at an undisclosed location in the Isdalen Valley. This case has received far less attention than it deserves considering its strange circumstances, which include several suspicious fires in the area, mysterious footprints, and an unmarked grave that may or may not contain her remains. Even though almost 53 years have passed since these events took place, this case is still considered unsolved, which is why today we are going to discuss it in detail. And hopefully by doing so, we can help to keep the memory of this poor woman alive. So let's get into it. The year was 1970, and the location was a small rural town in Norway named Røros. The nearest airport is called Røros Airport, which is located about 28 kilometers away from the town itself. Now, for those of you who don't know, Norway is a country located in northern Europe. It is known for its fjords, mountains, and of course its vast wilderness areas. This particular case took place in an area known as the Isdalen Valley, which is a sparsely populated valley located about 45 minutes outside of the town of Røros. This area is quite remote with rugged terrain consisting of forests and mountains. Before we go any further, I just want to point out that the name of this valley is often misspelled as Isdal. However, according to official sources, the correct spelling is Isdalen. I just thought I would point this out because I've noticed some of my viewers have been misspelling it in the comments section. But anyway, on with the show. In the summer of 1970, the valley was a popular hiking destination for tourists and locals alike. It was around 11 a.m. when the hikers were making their way along a trail near the top of the valley when they came across something that made them stop in their tracks. They had come across the charred remains of a human body lying face down in a shallow, rocky area. The body was badly burned, and initially they couldn't tell if it was male or female. When the police arrived at the scene, they did their best to preserve what was left of the body. They covered it with wet leaves and transported it back to the nearest hospital where it could be examined by a pathologist. After examining the remains, the police were able to confirm that it was the body of a young female. She was between 20 and 30 years old and stood somewhere between 160 and 165 centimeters tall. She had long dark hair, and when she was found, she was wearing a purple and white check dress and black shoes. Despite the fact that the body was burned, the police were able to determine that she had died from blunt force trauma to the head before being set on fire. Unfortunately, they were unable to identify the body, and no missing persons reports had come in for women matching her description. As you may have already guessed, this case immediately received a great deal of media attention, especially because there had been 3 other suspicious fires in the area over the previous few months. None of these fires had resulted in any deaths, but many people began to speculate that they were all connected. The first fire had occurred in March and involved a man who had parked his car at the top of the mountain and set it on fire. The second fire had taken place in April and involved a woman's cabin. And the third fire had occurred in May and involved a youth hostel. Luckily, none of these fires had resulted in any injuries. But now there was yet another disturbing crime to solve: the murder of an unknown woman. On July 2nd, the police released a statement to the press describing the personal belongings that had been found near the body. In total, they had recovered a purple handbag, a woven belt bag, a pair of sandals, a pack of gallows of cigarettes, a lighter, a fork, a knife, a spoon, a glass eye, a blue plastic comb, a toothbrush, a half-empty bottle of milk, 2 pairs of ladies' tights and nylon stockings, several pieces of rope, a piece of string, a metal hook, a nail brush, a bar of soap, a towel, a raincoat, a pair of overalls, a pair of sunglasses, a notebook, a pen, a diary, a key ring for keys, a brass ruler, a pack of matches, a red woolen hat, a blue cardigan, a white blouse, a black leather belt, 2 dresses, one of which was the same pattern as the one found on the victim, a pair of brown knee-high boots, a watch, a pair of gloves, a purse, a transistor radio, a record player, a pillowcase, bed linen, blankets, a green glass jar, a frying pan, a saucepan, a kettle, a box of biscuits, 2 wine bottles, one of which contained traces of blood, a corkscrew, a kitchen knife, a tea glass, a mug, a plate, and a small amount of cash. It was also noted that some of the items, such as the diary, the notebook, the purse, the glasses, and the clothing, showed no signs of having been used. Other items such as the bed linen, blankets, Towels and clothing appeared to have been recently washed. As time went on, the police began to investigate each item individually. They even sent the victim's clothes to a lab to see if they could find out who she might be. At first they thought that perhaps the clothes had belonged to a young woman who had come to hike in the valley and then disappeared. So they began checking local hostels and hotels to see if anyone matching her description was reported missing, but they soon learned that this was not the case. A few weeks later, the police released a composite sketch of the belongings in an effort to identify the victim. They stated that they believed she was most likely between 25 and 30 years old, and that the majority of the belongings had probably been packed in the 2 large suitcases. The police also revealed that the diary had been closed and locked, suggesting that the victim had been very private. Today, the contents of the suitcase remain unexplained. There was nothing in them that helped the police identify the victim. In addition to combing through the victim's belongings, the police also searched the area where her body was found for clues. This proved to be difficult because the area had already been disturbed by onlookers. But they did manage to find some interesting items. These included parts of the plastic buckets, a wine bottle wrapped in a plastic bag, a piece of rope, and some tire tracks. One of the most interesting pieces of evidence they found was a pair of footprints. The prints had been made in soft earth and had been partially covered by rocks. At first glance, they didn't really look like anything, just the prints left behind by someone walking through a field. However, when the police examined them more closely, they noticed something peculiar. They couldn't figure out whether they had been made by a man or a woman. This was due to the fact that the feet themselves were quite small and narrow, but the overall shape of the footprint suggested that they belonged to a man. The police had never seen anything like it before. As time went on, the police began to grow more and more frustrated. Every day they got closer to solving the case, but no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't seem to put the pieces of the puzzle together. People in the town began to complain that they were focusing too much on this case and not enough on others. But the police refused to let up. In August of 1970, they released a new composite image of the belongings in an effort to jog people's memories. Still, nobody came forward with any helpful information. Then, 5 months later, they got a break. A hiker who wished to remain anonymous called the police to report that he had discovered what may have been the victim's skull in a nearby forest. The police searched the area, but were unable to locate the skull. Later that year, another hiker came forward to say that he had seen a similar skull on a hilltop. Again, the police searched the area, but the skull was never found. In September of 1971, the police announced that they believed the victim had been killed elsewhere and then her body had been brought to the Isdalen Valley. They also said that they believed she had been murdered by an unknown person, but that they were keeping an open mind about the possibility that the murder had been accidental. In the end, nobody ever came forward with any helpful information. On January 11, 1972, the police held a press conference and announced that they were closing the case. They admitted that they may never know exactly what happened to the Isdalen woman, but they believed that she had been a 28-year-old Danish woman named Inga Maria. They believed that she had traveled to Norway with an unknown male companion, had had an argument with him, and he had then beaten her to death and burned her body. Despite the fact that this case has remained unsolved for almost 53 years, there are some things that we do know. We know that the victim was a young female who was most likely between 20 and 30 years old. We know that she was about 160 to 165 centimeters tall and had long dark hair. We know that she was well educated and financially stable, and we know that she had been brutally murdered. What we do not know is what her name was, where she was from, why she was in the Isdalen Valley, or who was responsible for her death. This case is particularly interesting because there are so many unanswered questions. Who was the woman in the suitcase? Where did she come from? Why was she in the Isdalen Valley? Was she traveling with a male companion? If so, what happened to him? And finally, who was responsible for her death and why? Unfortunately, we may never know the answers to these questions, but one thing is for sure, the Isdalen woman will never be forgotten. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like and subscribe for more content. Also be sure to check out my podcast where I discuss similar cases. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more.